なたのすべてが好きよ好きよ好きよ好きよ好きよ一番好きよ
Urusei Yatsura Born, Episode 3, That Obnoxious Alien Girl. Tomobiki City slowly awakened beneath the light of a brand new Monday. The first rays of sunshine peeked over the horizon, bathing the sea in golden light as the morning trains began rolling through the city and students headed off to school. High above the clouds, hidden from everyone's sight, Lum's yellow tiger-striped flying saucer floated silently in the sky. Inside the ship, Lum slowly opened her eyes. She sat up in bed, stretched her arms, and let out a long, sleepy yawn, just like a cat waking from a peaceful nap. What a beautiful morning! Without wasting a second, she slipped into her training clothes and started her daily workout. First came a long set of push-ups. Then she hopped onto a treadmill positioned in front of the huge bridge window and began running while watching Tomobiki come to life beneath her feet. Meanwhile, at the Moroboshi household, Ataru was still fast asleep. His father was already dressed for work. His mother was busy preparing breakfast while the radio played softly in the background and the rice finished cooking. But Ataru kept snoring away, with absolutely no intention of getting up. Back aboard the flying saucer, Lum finished her run. She moved on to the leg machine, then lifted weights to strengthen her arms. Finally, she slipped on a pair of training gloves and walked over to a heavy punching bag hanging from the ceiling. Taped to the bag was a photograph of Ataru Moroboshi. Wham! Cheater! Wham! Fraud! Wham! Pervert! Wham! Degenerate! A powerful kick sent the punching bag swinging wildly back and forth. Lum watched it for a moment, then smiled with complete satisfaction. That's what you get for cheating. Grabbing a towel, she headed into the shower. Only moments later, steam began filling the room. Behind the fogged-up glass, her silhouette could barely be seen as she happily hummed a tune beneath the warm water. Meanwhile, at the Moroboshi house, Ataru was still asleep. His mother took a deep breath. She had finally run out of patience. She marched into his room, grabbed the futon, and yanked it away in one swift pull. Ataru rolled across the floor, still completely asleep. Mom, what are you doing? Get up already! Before he could even react, thud! She kicked him so hard that he rolled all the way into the hallway. Bathroom, you're already late! What a way to wake somebody up. Still half asleep, Ataru staggered into the bathroom. Meanwhile, Lum had just finished her shower. An electronic chime echoed through the ship's kitchen. Breakfast was ready. An automated machine served fresh fruit, juice, and a giant bowl of cereal featuring a cartoon Oni on the box. Lum sat down and happily dug into her breakfast. Meanwhile, back at the Moroboshi house, Ataru finally emerged wearing his school uniform and rushed straight to the dining room. He looked at the table. Nothing. No rice, no soup, no eggs, no milk, only a perfectly clean plate and a single lonely grain of rice left behind. He stared at it for a few seconds, picked it up between two fingers, popped it into his mouth, then silently looked at his parents. Where's breakfast? His mother simply shrugged. We ate it. You should have gotten up earlier. Ataru let out a long sigh. What wonderful parents. He grabbed his school bag in a hurry. I'm gonna be late. He dashed out the front door while still trying to put one of his shoes on. His mother watched him disappear around the corner. Simplicity. She slowly shook her head. Maybe someday he'll learn. She paused for a moment. Nope, better not get my hopes up. A few blocks later, Ataru caught up with Shinobu, who was leisurely walking toward Tomobiki High School. Little by little, more students joined them as they made their way through the streets toward campus. None of them had the slightest idea that before the morning was over, they'd be welcoming a very unusual new classmate. Classes had already begun. Mr. Onsen stood at the blackboard, slowly writing a long list of English verbs. Repeat after me. His voice drifted through the classroom, mixing with the hum of the ceiling fans and the constant chorus of cicadas outside. Ataru could barely keep his eyes open. He rested his head on one hand, yawned, glanced out the window, then yawned again. Mr. Onsen continued the lesson. Very good. Now, page 32. Ataru let out another enormous yawn. This is so boring. Trying not to attract attention, he quietly opened his school bag and pulled out the lunch his mother had packed for him. a huge rice ball, carefully wrapped. He looked to the left, then to the right. Mr. Onsen was still writing on the board with his back turned. Perfect. He took his first bite. Knock! Knock! Someone knocked on the classroom door. The entire class fell silent. The principal stepped inside, accompanied by two government officials dressed in dark suits. Mr. Onsen set down the chalk. Good morning, Principal. My apologies for the interruption, Professor. This will only take a few minutes. Of course. Mr. Onsen stepped aside. Every student stood up to greet the visitors. Every student except Ataru. He was still sitting there, desperately trying to finish swallowing his giant rice ball before anyone noticed. The principal smiled warmly. Dear students, today, we're pleased to announce a very important cultural exchange program between Earth and the Oni planet. Excited murmurs spread across the classroom. As a symbol of friendship and goodwill between our two peoples, an Oni exchange student will be joining our school beginning today. The whispers instantly grew louder. Many of you already know her. Some of you even saw her on television just a few weeks ago. And one of our own students had the honor of competing against her. Ataru slowly looked up. His mouth was still completely full. The principal extended a hand toward the doorway. Allow me to introduce your new classmate. The classroom door opened once again. Lum walked inside. Her long jade green hair was tied into its familiar twin braids, and her bright blue eyes sparkled with confidence. She wore the same navy blue school uniform as the other girls at Tomobiki High. A neatly tied yellow scarf around her neck identified her as an exchange student. She smiled with calm, effortless grace. It's a pleasure to meet you all. My name is Lum. I hope we can all become good friends. Ataru's eyes nearly popped out of his head. He tried to swallow all at once. The rice ball lodged firmly in his throat. He immediately began choking. Ataru, Shinobu started pounding him on the back. Swallow it already? The entire class turned to look at him. Lum couldn't help smiling. It was exactly the reaction she'd been hoping for. The boys were instantly captivated. Wow, she's gorgeous. She's even prettier than she looked on TV. Magain, Perm, Chibi, and Kakugari practically sparkled with excitement. The girls, however, exchanged uneasy glances. So that's the invader? She's really an alien? And why is every boy staring at her like that? Shinobu was still staring in disbelief. Excuse me, Principal. But she tried to invade Earth. How can she be attending school with us after everything that happened? The principal raised a hand, asking everyone to settle down. That's precisely why. Resentment won't lead us anywhere. This exchange program is meant to build understanding and strengthen the friendship between our two worlds. Mr. Onsen nodded with a kind smile. Welcome to our class, Lum. I hope we'll all get along. Lum gave a small, polite bow. Thank you very much. I'll do my very best to become friends with everyone. As she spoke those words, she slowly turned her eyes toward Ataru. A sweet and unmistakably mischievous smile spread across her face. Still red from choking on the rice ball, Ataru felt a chill run down his spine. Oh no! What the heck are you doing here? The principal looked around the classroom. Very well, Lum. You may choose any seat you'd like. For a brief moment, every boy in the room held his breath. Several desks were empty throughout the classroom. Lum calmly looked at each one, then smiled. Thank you. She began walking slowly between the rows. The boys followed her every step with eager eyes. There's an empty seat over here. No, sit next to me. Over here, Lum. She walked right past every one of them. Without slowing down, she continued all the way to Ataru's desk. He had only just recovered from choking. Slowly, he looked up. No. Lum smiled with complete innocence. Good morning. She sat down right beside him. Ataru froze. Shinobu's eyes widened in outrage. Hey, why did you sit there? Lum smiled again. Pure coincidence. Ataru shot to his feet. There's nothing coincidental about this, Professor. She's here to ruin my life. The entire classroom fell silent. Mr. Onsen let out a weary sigh. Moriboshi. Sit down. But, Professor, sit. Grumbling under his breath, Ataru reluctantly sat back down. Same as always. Mr. Onsen resumed the lesson as though nothing had happened. Lum quietly faced the blackboard, listening attentively. Every now and then, she stole a quick glance at Ataru out of the corner of her eye. That alone was enough to make him even more nervous. A few minutes later, the school bell rang, announcing recess. Before Mr. Onsen had even reached the classroom door, every boy rushed straight to Lum's desk. Nice to meet you. What's your planet like? Can you really fly? Is it true you can shoot lightning? What do Oni people eat? Questions flew at her from every direction. Lum answered each one with a warm, friendly smile. From across the room, the girls watched the scene unfold. I seriously don't get what they see in her. You'd think they'd never seen a pretty girl before. Shinobu folded her arms. She didn't look especially pleased by all the attention Lum was receiving. Has everyone already forgotten she's the invader? Meanwhile, Ataru remained seated at his desk, arms crossed, staring suspiciously at the alien girl. No. This can't be a coincidence. She's definitely planning something. Lum glanced in his direction, caught his eye, and smiled once again. That smile alone made Ataru even more uneasy. Meanwhile, in one corner of the classroom, Megain quietly gathered Perm, Chibi, Kakugari, and the rest of their friends. He lowered his voice and spoke with absolute solemnity. My friends, as of today, our lives have changed forever. The others listened with shining eyes. We have been blessed by the presence of the magnificent Lum. It is now our sacred duty to protect her, especially from certain undesirable womanizers. He shot Ataru a look of absolute contempt. We shall admire her and become her most loyal followers. Everyone raised a fist into the air at the same time. Yeah. Without anyone else realizing it, the Lum fan club had just been born, and Ataru couldn't shake the feeling that from this day forward, his life at Tomobiki High would never be peaceful again. Over the next several days, Lum's arrival completely transformed everyday life at Tomobiki High. Every morning as class began, the students stood and greeted their teacher. Good morning, Mr. Onsen. Good morning, everyone. Mr. Onsen placed his books on the desk. Very well. You may all sit down. Ataru dropped into his chair. Crack! All four legs instantly snapped apart. Crash! Ataru slammed flat onto his back, while the chair collapsed into a pile of broken boards and scattered screws. The classroom exploded with laughter. Shinobu rushed over. Ataru, are you okay? Groaning, Ataru slowly got back to his feet. As he glanced to one side, he spotted Lum quietly slipping a tiny screwdriver into her desk. She looked at him with an innocent smile. Oh, dear. What terrible luck. Ataru clenched his teeth. He took a deep breath. He couldn't prove a thing. Without another word, he grabbed another chair and sat down while the class continued laughing. Another day, during literature class, the teacher was explaining a famous work of classical Japanese literature. Bored out of his mind, Ataru waited until no one was looking. He reached into his lunchbox, pulled out a rice ball, and stuffed the entire thing into his mouth in one bite. 1 second later, his face changed color. Bright red, then purple, then even redder than before. Smoke practically began pouring from his ears. Water! He leaped out of his seat and sprinted frantically around the classroom looking for something to drink. The students burst into laughter all over again. Lum simply sat there reading her book. A tiny smile appeared on her face. The teacher pointed toward the hallway. Moroboshi. Out in the corridor. A few moments later, Ataru stood outside the classroom as punishment, holding a bucket over his head. Through the classroom window, he could see Lum. She briefly looked up from her notebook, smiled at him once again, and went right back to studying. Physical education. The boys and girls lined up around the running track. The coach blew the whistle. Go! Everyone dashed forward. For the first few meters, Ataru managed to keep pace. Lum, dressed in Tomobiki High's gym uniform, her signature red athletic shorts and fitted white t-shirt, ran so effortlessly it almost looked as though she wasn't touching the ground. Without the slightest effort, she passed Ataru. Once she was just ahead of him, she spun around while still running, facing him with a playful grin. Well, well. If it isn't Earth's great hero, she laughed cheerfully. Ha! Then she turned back around and accelerated away, leaving him farther and farther behind. Completely exhausted, Ataru could barely keep his eyes forward. Panting for breath, his head hanging low, the only thing he could see was Lum's back. And, naturally, the tight red shorts outlining her heart-shaped figure as she ran farther into the distance. Shinobu, running beside him, saw exactly where he was looking. Or at least, what she thought he was looking at. She frowned. What exactly are you staring at, Ataru? Before he could answer, wham! She drove an elbow straight into his stomach. The blow knocked every last bit of air out of him. Ataru completely lost his balance. His feet tangled in his shoelaces, he stumbled forward, and crashed face first onto the track. By the time he managed to get back up, Lum had already finished the race. She wasn't even breathing hard. The girls surrounded her in admiration. Incredible! She's unbelievably fast! Several minutes later, Ataru finally crossed the finish line. Completely exhausted, he dropped to his knees. No way. Several days later, it was volleyball class. Lum was the captain of the girls' team. Across the net stood the boys' team. Ataru grinned confidently. Now we'll see who's really going to win. The match began. Lum leaped into the air. Smash! Her spike blasted straight through the defense. Point! Another serve. Another thunderous spike. Another point. The boys couldn't stop a single shot. Ataru jumped to block the next one. Wham! The volleyball smashed directly into his face. Poof! He was launched backward and landed flat on his back, his face completely squashed. Lum walked over with a sweet smile. Oops. I guess I put a little too much strength into that one. The girls immediately gathered around her. What an amazing spike! She's incredible! Mr. Onsen wrote the final score on the board. Victory goes to the girls' team. Then he looked toward Ataru. Moriboshi, since you barely participated in today's match, you'll be cleaning the locker rooms. What? But that was her fault. Less complaining, more cleaning. Another recess. Several tables had been pushed together in the schoolyard. The students were holding an arm wrestling tournament. Gorilla easily defeated every boy who challenged him, until Lum quietly sat down across from him. Shall we? Everyone held their breath. The match began. 5 seconds later, bam! Gorilla's hand slammed flat against the table. Silence. Then the entire courtyard erupted into applause. She beat him! She actually beat Gorilla! Incredible. Lum then defeated Perm, then Chibi, then Kakugari. One after another, every challenger accepted defeat with embarrassed laughter. Ataru finally stepped forward. This has gone far enough. No woman can possibly be stronger than a man. They let you win. They're just trying to impress you. I'll prove the truth. He sat down across from Lum. She smiled mischievously. Well, well, what do we have here? The great hero himself. She calmly rested her elbow on the table. Whenever you're ready. They locked hands. 3, 2, 1. Ataru strained with all his might. His arm immediately began trembling. Lum's expression never changed. Slowly, almost effortlessly, she began forcing his arm downward. Her smile never faded. Then, BAM! Ataru's hand slammed into the tabletop. The impact sent him flying backward off his chair. He crashed onto the ground. Lum burst into cheerful laughter. The entire schoolyard exploded into applause. The girls crowded around her, beaming with excitement. Wow! You're unbelievably strong. I wish I were in shape like you. You're our champion, the strongest girl in all of Tomobiki. Still lying flat on the ground, Ataru groaned, but I saved the earth. Megain looked down at him with complete disdain. By cheating. Pervert. The others immediately nodded. Pervert. Cheater. While everyone celebrated around Lum, Shinobu helped Ataru back onto his feet. He stared at the scene in frustration. His fists slowly tightened. This isn't over yet. The annual physical fitness evaluation had arrived. Inside the school gymnasium, the PE teacher lined up the students. One by one, they stepped onto the scale, then stood beneath the height chart, while she carefully recorded everyone's weight and height. The boys chatted about how much they'd grown since last year. The girls laughed and compared their own results. Little by little, the line grew shorter until everyone had finished. Everyone, except one. Ataru. Instead of walking over to the height chart, he leaned casually against a wall, whistling to himself as though none of this had anything to do with him. From the opposite side of the gym, Lum quietly watched him. She tilted her head slightly and smiled. She understood exactly what was going on. The teacher checked her clipboard. Moriboshi. She looked up. You're the only one left. Ataru pretended not to hear. I think you already measured me last year. The entire class burst into laughter. Ataru, stop holding up the class. Come on. Gorilla and Perm walked over and started pushing him toward the measuring station. Megain pointed at him with a grin. What's wrong? Is Earth's great hero afraid of a ruler? The laughter only grew louder. Ataru struggled to break free. Leave me alone! At that moment, Lum slowly walked over. She folded her arms, looked him up and down, and smiled. Well, so that's what this is about? Ataru took a nervous step backward. What do you want now? Lum stopped directly in front of him. She casually compared their heights, then lowered her head just enough to look him straight in the eyes. A satisfied smile spread across her face. So, I'm taller than you. Ataru fired back immediately. I'm average height. You're the alien. Lum almost laughed. She gently rested one hand on top of his head. Come here for a second. Before he could escape, she effortlessly guided him over to the height chart. Ataru struggled to resist, but Lum was far stronger. With one hand, she held him firmly against the measuring stand while lowering the bar with the other. Hold still. I'm not finished yet. She checked the measurement, then raised her voice. Girls, write this down. 1 meter, 64. The girls burst into laughter. So it was true. He's tiny. I thought he was taller. No wonder he's always looking up at everyone. Ataru's face turned bright red. He tried once more to break free. Let me go. Lum barely applied any force at all. Ataru couldn't move an inch. She glanced at the scale. And you don't weigh very much either. The girls kept laughing. One of them giggled. No wonder he never stands out in PE. Another added, of course not. He spends all day chasing girls instead of training. Or spying on us while we're changing. Pervert. Another girl folded her arms. If you spent half as much time exercising as you do bothering us, you wouldn't be so out of shape. Shinobu sighed. I've been trying to tell him that for years. At last, Lum released him. Ataru stumbled backward a couple of steps, completely humiliated. Then Lum took her own place beneath the height chart. The teacher lowered the measuring bar, then had to raise it much higher. She wrote down the number. The girls looked at Lum with admiration. She was tall, athletic, and perfectly proportioned. Unlike Ataru, every movement she made reflected years of intense physical training. An Oni warrior had been raised for combat since childhood. Strong legs, powerful shoulders, perfect posture. The teacher smiled approvingly. Excellent physical condition. One of the girls whispered. She's not just beautiful. She looks like a professional athlete. Another nodded. Now I understand why she's such an incredible runner. A third sighed dreamily. I wish I had that kind of discipline. Lum smiled proudly. Then she glanced sideways at Ataru. This is what a champion looks like. Ataru clenched his fists. He looked around the gym. No one was paying any attention to him anymore. Every girl had gathered around Lum, asking questions and admiring her athletic physique. With his hands buried in his pockets, Ataru slowly walked out of the gym. As he disappeared down the hallway, he could still hear the last echoes of laughter behind him. Bye-bye, shorty. The gym erupted into laughter once again. Lum smiled with quiet satisfaction. She had discovered yet another one of Ataru's weak points, and she had every intention of using it. Later that afternoon, Ataru and Shinobu were in Ataru's room. He paced back and forth, furious. Do you see now? This is all that alien girl's fault. She enrolled in our school for one reason. To humiliate me. She never misses a single chance to make a fool out of me. And those idiots have completely fallen for it. Ataru clenched his fists. I'm not going to let her keep laughing at me. This is a matter of pride. Shinobu let out a tired sigh. Ataru, calm down. You're reacting exactly the way she wants you to. If you just stop paying attention to her, I'm sure she'd eventually get bored. Ataru shook his head. You don't understand. This is a man's pride. You're a woman. You could never understand. Shinobu glared at him. Oh, shut up, you idiot. What does me being a woman have to do with anything? We can do everything men can do. You're just arrogant and a complete jerk. Before Ataru could answer, Shinobu grabbed his arm. With one swift judo throw, she flipped him clean over her shoulder. Wham! Ataru landed flat on his back. Shinobu folded her arms. There. Does that count as a man's pride too? She turned around, stormed out of the room, and slammed the door behind her. Bang! Ataru remained sprawled across the floor. Ow! She's got quite a temper. High above the Moriboshi house, Lum's flying saucer remained hidden among the clouds. Inside, Lum continued lifting weights as part of her daily training. In front of her, a small monitor displayed a live video feed of everything happening inside Ataru's bedroom. She smiled with satisfaction. Well, this is turning out to be even more entertaining than I imagined. Back in his room, Ataru slowly got to his feet. Then suddenly, his eyes widened. Wait a second. He immediately began searching the entire room. He yanked open drawers, turned over his desk, shoved the wardrobe aside, lifted the futon, even ripped pictures off the walls. There has to be a camera! That alien's spying on me! His mother opened the bedroom door and froze. The room looked as though a typhoon had swept through it. Ataru, what on earth are you doing? Mom! I knew it. That alien's been spying on me. There have to be hidden cameras or microphones. Mrs. Moriboshi picked up a broom. The only thing I see is a son who's trashed his room again. Bonk! She smacked him on the head. When you're done playing detective, you're going to clean up every bit of this mess. She walked out, closing the door behind her. Ataru kept searching. Then, behind a shelf, he found something. A tiny metallic robot, small enough to fit in the palm of his hand. A miniature camera protruded from one end. Ataru picked it up. A huge grin spread across his face. I found you! He held the tiny robot high toward the ceiling. Listen to me, alien! I knew you were spying on me! This isn't over! Inside the flying saucer, Lum calmly placed her weights back onto the rack. She wiped the sweat from her forehead with a towel. Her eyes remained fixed on the monitor. A playful smile crossed her face. Oh, so you finally found it. She pressed a button on the control panel. The tiny robot suddenly spoke with her voice. Then let's settle this. Face to face. A hatch beneath the flying saucer slowly opened. Lum gently floated down toward Ataru's bedroom window. Ataru turned his head, and there she was, hovering just outside the glass. You, Lum smiled brightly. Hello, Ataru. So, you finally found my camera. Ataru threw the window open. I want you to leave me alone. I want my life back. Lum calmly folded her arms. You'll get your life back the day you accept the truth. You never could have beaten me fairly. You only won because you cheated. Ataru gritted his teeth. The only cheater here was you. You never told me you could fly. Lum smiled. You never asked. And besides, I don't need my powers to prove I'm better than you. Ataru stepped forward. Oh, yeah? Then prove it. The first one to pin the other down is the real winner of the tournament. Lum smiled confidently. I accept. Without another word. They lunged at each other at the same time. Without another word, they charged at each other. Ataru lunged forward, trying to grab both of Lum's arms. In one smooth motion, Lum spun around and threw him to the floor with a flawless judo throw. Ataru rolled across the room, but quickly recovered. He shoved Lum backward into the desk. Crash! The desk tipped over. Books flew everywhere. Lum sprang back to her feet without missing a beat and launched herself at Ataru again. The two of them crashed into the wardrobe. The doors burst open. Clothes rained down over both of them. Ataru managed to grab Lum around the waist. Lum shifted her weight, throwing him completely off balance. They tumbled across the carpet together. A chair flew into the wall. The futon was left in total disarray. The whole room shook from the commotion. After another fierce struggle, they rolled wildly from one side of the room to the other, knocking over chairs, slamming into the desk, and making the wooden floor creak beneath them. Finally, Lum gained the upper hand. Breathing hard, she completely pinned Ataru to the carpet. She held both of his arms firmly above his head, while trapping his legs between her own. She was panting from the effort. A slow, proud, mischievous smile spread across her face. Ataru struggled for breath. Completely immobilized, he stared desperately up at Lum. For a brief moment, everything went still. Then, his eyes flashed. Without warning, he jerked his head forward and bit down on Lum's tiger-striped bikini top. With one sharp tug, he yanked it free with his teeth. You pervert! Bright red with embarrassment, Lum instinctively released one of his arms so she could snatch it back before he stripped it off completely. That tiny opening was all Ataru needed. He immediately freed his other arm, shoved Lum away with all his strength, and the two of them began rolling wildly across the carpet once again like an out-of-control top. They slammed into the desk, knocked over another chair, crashed into the wardrobe, and spun across the room once more. When they finally came to a stop, their positions had completely reversed. Now, Ataru was the one on top. Both of them lay perfectly still, breathing heavily, exhausted after the struggle. Their faces were only inches apart. Their eyes locked on one another. Downstairs, Mr. and Mrs. Moriboshi calmly ate lunch as though nothing unusual was happening. Each loud crash made the ceiling lamp sway back and forth. Tiny bits of plaster drifted down onto the table. Mr. Moriboshi quietly turned another page of his newspaper. There they go again, Mrs. Moriboshi sighed. Sometimes I wonder if we should have had that boy at all. Just then, ding dong, the doorbell rang. Mrs. Moriboshi answered it. Standing outside was Shinobu. Good afternoon, Mrs. Moriboshi. I accidentally left my bag in Ataru's room. Mrs. Moriboshi smiled kindly. Of course, dear. Come on in. At that exact moment, another tremendous crash shook the entire house. Mrs. Moriboshi glanced upstairs. And while you're at it, tell him to stop making so much noise. Shinobu nodded politely. Yes, ma'am? She calmly walked upstairs, stopped in front of Ataru's bedroom door, and opened it. Ataru, I forgot my... The words caught in her throat. The entire room had been destroyed. Furniture lay overturned. Clothes were scattered everywhere. Books covered the floor. And in the middle of the wreckage, Ataru and Lum lay frozen on the carpet after their final tumble. Ataru, without even realizing it, was still holding Lum's tiger-striped bikini top in his hands. Blushing bright red, Lum hurriedly snatched it away, covering herself as quickly as she put it back on. Silence. No one said a word. Tears slowly welled up in Shinobu's eyes. So, you've been lying to me all this time. You two are lovers. Ataru's face went completely pale. No, Shinobu, it's not what it looks like. I can't explain. But Shinobu wasn't listening anymore. She turned around and ran down the stairs. How stupid I've been. Now I understand everything. Shinobu, wait! Ataru raced after her. When he finally caught up on the first floor, he grabbed her by the arm. Shinobu spun around instantly. With one lightning-fast judo move, she slipped free, seized Ataru's arm, and hurled him violently across the room. Crash! He slammed into the corner of the house. Mr. and Mrs. Moriboshi could only stare in stunned disbelief. Shinobu picked up her bag, threw open the front door, and ran outside in tears. Shinobu! Ataru scrambled back to his feet and chased after her. The front door slammed shut. Silence filled the house. Upstairs, Lum calmly finished adjusting her bikini top. She brushed her hair back into place, then looked out the bedroom window. Far below, Ataru was desperately chasing after Shinobu. A small smile slowly appeared on Lum's face. Well, that turned out even better than I expected. From the balcony outside Ataru's room, Lum watched the street below as she casually adjusted her hair and straightened her tiger-striped bikini top. Far in the distance, Ataru desperately chased after Shinobu. Shinobu, with tears streaming down her face, Shinobu never looked back. She just kept running. Soon, both of them disappeared into the streets of Tomobiki, vanishing into the darkness of the evening. Lum smiled to herself. Well, without even trying. That worked out even better than I imagined. With a soft mechanical hum, she slid open the bedroom window, then gently floated up above the balcony. Within seconds, she soared through the clouds, returning to the small flying saucer that had remained hidden above the Moriboshi house all along. She landed lightly on the entrance hatch, stepped inside, and started walking. After only a few steps, she stopped. She blinked. A chair was lying upside down. A cushion had been tossed into the middle of the floor. A table had been shoved out of place. Huh? She walked farther into the ship. Now she noticed candy wrappers scattered everywhere. Empty juice bottles, milk cartons, open bags of chips, bread tossed across the floor. The place looked like a battlefield. Lum's smile slowly disappeared. She began to feel uneasy. Then she noticed something else. The refrigerator door was hanging wide open. She hurried over. There was almost nothing left inside. Her heartbeat quickened. Following the trail of destruction, she rushed toward the ship's main compartment. And there, she froze. Mountains of food covered the floor. Hams, salamis, bread, cheese, fruit, candy, wrappers. Everything was scattered everywhere, as though a hurricane had swept through the room. Right in the middle of the chaos, a gigantic figure crouched on the floor, devouring everything in sight. An enormous salami stuck out of his mouth, while both hands shoveled food into it at an impossible speed. Lum's eyes went wide. Ray! The huge figure slowly raised his head. The instant he saw Lum, his eyes sparkled with joy. He immediately dropped everything he was eating, charged straight toward her, and wrapped her in a crushing bear hug that nearly lifted her off the floor. Lum struggled desperately. Hey, what are you doing here? Ray only squeezed her even tighter. Missed. You. Gasping for air, Lum pushed against him with all her strength. Finally, she managed to turn her head just enough to ask, completely bewildered, "How did you even get here?" End of episode 3.